Buried beneath mountains, tucked beneath desert sand, or sealed behind stone, ancient civilizations left behind not only monuments, but memories. Some believed they guarded treasures, others whispered of curses. But tonight, there's no danger. No need to be afraid. Only soft torchlight, cool air under stone ceilings, and the calming hush of civilizations long gone. Let's travel together, into the resting places of kings, queens, emperors, and myth, and let their stories lull you to sleep. Take a deep breath. Release your shoulders, let your thoughts grow slower, and we'll begin in Egypt. The year was 1922. The morning was bright, but the valley was silent. Empty, except for a handful of men brushing dust from the earth. For weeks they'd searched for something long lost. And on that day, they found it. A step. Then a stair. Then a sealed doorway. They had discovered the tomb of a boy king, Tutankhamun, who had ruled Egypt more than 3,000 years before. Inside, golden treasures lay exactly as they'd been placed. Chariots, statues, a throne, and a mask, delicately shaped, eyes closed, serene. But soon, the whispers began. One man died from a mosquito bite, another from a sudden illness, and so the legend spread, the curse of the pharaoh. But if we pause, if we look closely, what do we really find? There were no hieroglyphs that promised death, no traps sprung, just a quiet tomb, disturbed by curious hands. Historians today believe the curse was mostly myth, exaggerated by newspapers eager to thrill their readers. Most who entered the tomb lived long lives. What was far more mysterious was how still everything was inside. After 3,000 years, no movement, no sound, no decay, only quiet. The walls were painted with soft gods and golden light, symbols for protection, not punishment. Even the tomb seal had simply read, Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. No curses. Just names. And perhaps that's all tombs truly are. Not traps for the living, but soft whispers of the dead, asking us to remember. Let's now drift eastward. The air grows warmer, drier. You begin to hear the soft trickle of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. We've entered the lands of ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, a cradle of civilization. The tombs here were not golden like Egypt's. They were modest, humble, made from sun-baked bricks, carefully stacked, then sealed with clay. The Sumerians, one of the world's first recorded civilizations, believed deeply in the power of names. To forget a name was to lose someone forever. So even in death, the deceased were honored with cylinder seals, carved clay tokens pressed into wet bricks, to immortalize who they were. The elite were buried with objects for the afterlife, tiny statues, simple tools, musical instruments made from bone and string. And while later myths speak of Mesopotamian demons and angry spirits, the tombs themselves were still, quiet, peaceful. No fiery curses etched in stone, just gentle inscriptions that said, "May the dead rest. May no evil come to this place." They weren't warnings, they were blessings. Protective, not fearful. In the royal cemetery of Ur, archaeologists found a queen's tomb, Lady Puabi, filled with golden combs, lyres, and a stunning headdress of gold and lapis lazuli. Yet what struck the researchers most was not the treasure, but the care. The way her bones had been gently laid, the offerings neatly placed, the suggestion that someone long ago had truly loved her. These tombs were homes, not haunted places. And for the Mesopotamians, death was a continuation, not an ending. So now close your eyes for a moment. Picture a flickering oil lamp on a clay altar, a priest softly chanting, the warm wind carrying your name into the stars, and rest. Now let's move gently through dense green jungles. The air becomes humid, scented with moss and flowers. You begin to hear birds and the distant echo of stone drums. We've arrived in Mesoamerica, the lands of the ancient Maya. Their cities were filled with pyramids, tall stone steps reaching toward the sky. Inside these towering temples were tombs, chambers painted red with cinnabar, a bright crimson powder made from mercury ore. To us it might seem ominous, but to the Maya, red was the color of life, of blood, of the sun rising again. The tombs here were often deep underground, meant to resemble Xibalba, the Maya underworld. It was not a place of torture, but of transition, a journey. Kings and queens were buried with jade jewelry, sacred maize, and tiny figurines. They believed these offerings would help the soul find its way through the 9 levels of Xibalba, a spiritual labyrinth. Many tombs were sealed with carvings of gods, but few contained warnings. No curses, no threats, just quiet. Some archaeologists, unprepared, grew dizzy inside the red tombs. Not from ghosts, but from the cinnabar dust. A real danger, yes, but no ancient vengeance. Just the side effect of a spiritual tradition we barely understand. The Maya saw death not as an ending, but as a deep river, one that flowed below the earth, beneath the temples, under the moonlit trees. They placed shells by the ears of the dead, so they could hear the underworld's music. And sometimes, entire ball courts were built near tombs, so the sound of life, laughter, cheers, footsteps, could echo through the stones. Now imagine, you are in a tomb like that. The air is warm, the walls are red, and above you, a jungle breathes. Birds call, trees sway, and far in the distance, someone plays a flute. Sleep now. The river flows beneath you. Now we float across the continent, the jungle fades behind us, and misty hills begin to rise. We've arrived in central China, in the province of Shanxi, where beneath an ancient mound of earth, lies a tomb untouched for over 2,000 years. It belongs to Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. He ruled with force, but dreamed of eternity. To guard his tomb, he commissioned thousands of life-size clay soldiers, the terracotta army, each one unique, with different faces, armor, and even tread patterns on their shoes. They stand in silent ranks, still as statues, yet somehow alive with purpose. The emperor's actual tomb, however, remains sealed. Ancient Chinese historians wrote that the burial chamber was filled with rivers of mercury, booby traps, crossbows rigged to fire at intruders. But the tomb has never been opened, not because of fear, but out of deep respect. Scientists today have detected high levels of mercury in the soil above the chamber, confirming the stories may be true, but still, it waits, silent, unbothered. They say the ceiling of the tomb is decorated like the night sky, with pearls for stars. The floor, a replica of China's rivers and mountains. The emperor sleeps beneath a map of the world he once ruled. This is not a place of terror. It's a memory, a moment perfectly preserved. Imagine yourself standing before the mound. The wind is soft, cicadas hum, the earth holds a secret, and it does not need to be disturbed. Not tonight, not in your dreams. Instead, you rest here at a distance, eyes closed, feeling the weight of history beneath your feet, and the stars above. Let's return now to where our journey began. Back to the hot sands and quiet cliffs of Egypt's Valley of the Kings. Because while the tomb of Tutankhamun is the most famous, it is far from the only one. Dozens of pharaohs, queens and nobles lie beneath this desert. Some tombs decorated with vivid paintings, others left plain, all wrapped in ancient silence. But something curious happened in the early 20th century. A story caught fire, the idea of a pharaoh's curse. It wasn't new. Older Victorian tales had hinted at it. But when Lord Carnarvon, the sponsor of King Tut's tomb excavation, died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite, the world leapt to conclusions. Soon, every cough, every trip, every faded flower near the excavation was branded cursed. Newspapers wrote stories of mummies rising. Poets penned warnings. Even Hollywood joined in, creating the first mummy films. But in reality, most members of the team lived long, quiet lives. Howard Carter, the lead archaeologist, lived for 17 years after the tomb was opened. The curse seemed to affect only the imagination. In truth, ancient Egyptians believed in protection, not revenge. Tombs were inscribed with spells, yes, but spells meant to guide and guard. The so-called curses were usually practical. Disturb not the tomb lest you bring disease and decay upon yourself. A poetic way of saying, please leave this space alone. And yet, there's something beautifully human about our fascination with cursed tombs. We want history to be alive, to reach out, to matter. So even though the curses are more fiction than fact, they remind us that the past isn't dead, it whispers. Not loudly, not with anger, but with care. So now, as you lie in your bed, the pharaoh's tomb is still sealed, still silent, still safe. There is no curse, only time and sleep. Now let's rise. Higher and higher, until clouds curl around your ankles, and the wind carries whispers in a language long gone. You're in the Andes Mountains now, where the Inca and their ancestors buried their dead close to the sky. They believed the higher you rested, the closer you were to the gods. These tombs weren't deep underground. They were tucked into cliffs, folded into mountain caves, or sealed behind stone walls in ancient cities like Machu Picchu. The most honored were buried in fetal position, as if ready to be reborn. They were wrapped in layers of woven cloth, surrounded by pottery, maize and coca leaves. Tiny silver llamas, wooden spoons, shells from faraway seas. There was no fear, only preparation. One mummy, called the Ice Maiden, was discovered perfectly preserved near the summit of Mount Ampato, still wearing her braids, still dressed in her ceremonial shawl. She had been offered to the mountain, not as punishment, but as a sacred gift. Even today, the Quechua people speak softly about these ancient tombs. They say the mountains remember. They say the dead are listening, but not in anger, in peace. The tombs of the Andes are quiet places, high and cold, yes, but filled with sunlight, filled with wind. Can you feel it? A soft breeze on your cheek, the hush of distant flutes, the slow rhythm of stone against sky. Up here, the past doesn't haunt. It floats. Let your breath slow, let your thoughts quiet, and rest among the clouds. Now we travel to a land of vineyards and gentle hills, to central Italy, before the rise of Rome. To a people once powerful, now mostly forgotten, the Etruscans. Long before Caesar, before gladiators, before the Roman Empire, the Etruscans carved cities into hillsides and tombs into stone. They believed the afterlife was not a shadowy place, but a continuation, a banquet, a celebration. Their tombs were decorated with murals, dancers with flowing robes, musicians playing lyres and pipes, feasts with wine, bread and figs. It was not meant to scare, it was meant to comfort. One of the most famous is the Tomb of the Leopards, painted over 2,500 years ago. Inside, spotted cats perch above a joyful feast. Men and women raise cups in eternal toast. The air, even now, feels light, like music was playing only moments before. There were no curses, only color, only laughter on the walls. The tombs were often dug into the earth, their entrances hidden beneath grassy mounds. To find one today is to stumble across silence and a flicker of painted joy. Imagine stepping into one. It's cool, quiet. You smell old stone and earth. You hear nothing but your own breath. Then a shape on the wall. A painted musician, smiling. It's a party, one that never ended. And you were invited. So rest here a while. Let the music fade in your imagination. Let the flickering torchlight warm the stone. You are safe. You are remembered. You are among friends. Now the wind grows colder. The air, salty. You hear the soft crash of distant waves and the creak of old wood beneath your feet. You're in the north, where fjords carve the land, and the Vikings once ruled the sea. We often imagine them as fierce warriors. But when it came to death, they were poets of passage. Some were buried in ships. Real vessels, carved and crowned with dragon heads, laid deep in the earth, or gently pushed out to sea. Inside, wool cloaks, swords, drinking horns, and coins for the journey. They believed that death was not an end, but a voyage, to Valhalla for warriors, to Folkvanga for the peaceful. And so the ship was not a symbol of death, but of movement, of continuation. In Norway, archaeologists uncovered the Oseberg ship, buried over 1,100 years ago. Inside were two women, powerful, perhaps priestesses. They were laid with woven tapestries, ornate sleighs, and the soft scent of herbs still clung to the soil. There was no curse on this ship, no warning carved into the mast, just elegance, just sleep. And the idea that the sea, or the stars, would carry you onward. So picture this now. A ship, resting on calm waters, lanterns flicker, the sail flutters, and you lie on soft furs, watching the night sky as you drift. Not into danger, but into story. Sleep comes here like the tide, gentle and steady. Now the landscape changes again. You feel the warm hush of dust and sun, the distant shimmer of river water. We've arrived at one of the world's oldest civilizations, the Indus Valley, in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Here, cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa once flourished, with orderly streets, flowing drainage systems, and homes made of brick. But unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, no grand tombs were found here, no golden sarcophagi, no painted walls, instead, silence. The people of the Indus Valley buried their dead in simple graves, many in tightly curled positions, wrapped gently in cloth, laid with modest pottery, and perhaps a final meal. Some graves contained shell bangles, tiny terracotta figurines, or a favorite bead. No curses, no warnings, just peace. The simplicity of their burials remains a mystery. Were their rituals oral, passed down in stories now lost? Did they see death as private, not public? We don't know, and perhaps we're not meant to. But even in their quiet, these tombs speak volumes. They tell us that ancient people loved, they remembered, they grieved. Even without gold, without pyramids, they built something lasting. Now imagine you walk through this ancient city, dust swirls in the light, the walls are silent, but the past hums gently beneath your feet. You lie down beside a smooth clay jar. The earth is warm, the wind carries only kindness, and the people who once lived here, they don't mind the company. Now the winds shift westward over green hills and grey skies, mist clings to the moors, and the air smells of wet earth and heather. You're in ancient Britain, long before kings and castles, in the time of the Celts. Here tombs weren't always grand, but they were sacred. Built of standing stones, stacked in quiet fields, cairns, barrows, simple stone chambers hidden beneath grassy mounds. They weren't just for the dead, they were gateways. The Celts believed in another world, a place beyond mist and time, a land of eternal spring, soft music, and golden fields. To bury someone was to guide them there. They lit fires, chanted softly, and placed the dead among offerings. Antlers, talks of bronze, carefully chosen stones. Some tombs, like Newgrange in Ireland, were aligned with the winter solstice. Once a year, at dawn, the sun's light shines through a narrow passage and touches the chamber deep inside, a signal that even in death, the sun still returns. There were no curses, no traps, only fog and memory. These places feel alive, even now, not with ghosts, but with presence. You can almost hear footsteps in the heather, feel the warmth of a hand on stone, smell the smoke of an ancient fire, long gone, but not forgotten. Now imagine yourself in the chamber. The stone is cool against your back. Outside, the wind howls gently, but in here, it's still, it's safe. And the spirits, if they're watching, they're smiling, because you came to visit, and you came in peace. Now let's travel east once more, across dusty plains and sunlit ridges, to the ancient empire of Persia, where tombs were carved not beneath the earth, but high in the cliffs, facing the sky. We're standing at Naqsh Rustam, where 4 royal tombs rest, cut into a tall rock face like ancient windows to the past. This is the resting place of Darius the Great, and other Achaemenid kings. There are no hidden chambers here, no deep labyrinths, only solemn facades, decorated with carvings of kings and gods, standing between heaven and earth. Above each doorway, a figure is shown, lifting his hands to Ahura Mazda, the highest deity in the Persian faith. To the ancient Persians, death wasn't a trap or curse. It was a reunion, a return to light, to order, a sacred balance called Asher. The tombs were built high, perhaps to elevate the soul, perhaps to protect it from decay, but inside, they were simple, clean, quiet, like the desert around them. There are no inscriptions cursing intruders, no riddles, only rock and time. You can sit beneath these tombs as the sun sets, the stone glows amber, shadows stretch, and the heat of the day begins to drift away. You might feel small, but not unwelcome. Even the wind seems gentle here. It moves slowly between the pillars, like a whisper from someone long gone. And as stars begin to appear above the cliffs, you know the kings are sleeping, not in anger, not in fear, just sleeping. And now, so are you. Now, we drift downward. The sky fades into deep blue, and then darker still. You are beneath the surface now, floating gently. As light filters through like silver threads, we've arrived at the quietest tombs of all, those buried beneath the sea. Some civilizations were lost not to war, but to water. Legends speak of Atlantis, a mighty city swallowed whole by the ocean. Was it real? No one knows. But beneath modern oceans lie the ruins of real cities. Submerged temples in India's Gulf of Kambat, ancient stone structures off the coast of Japan, and sunken palaces in Alexandria. where Cleopatra once walked. When cities fell to waves, so too did their dead. Tombs swept into silence. Divers have found statues, columns, coffins of stone, resting on the seabed as fish drift through the halls of memory. These aren't haunted places. They are dreams beneath the waves. Places where time slows, where gravity softens, where stories rest. Even shipwrecks like the Titanic become tombs of sorts. Not in terror but in tribute. Soft corals bloom where staircases once rose. Rust forms lace over railings. And the sea hums a lullaby only the deep can hear. So picture yourself here, drifting gently above a sunken temple. Your body weightless, your breath slow. The sea presses in, not to harm, but to hold. And somewhere far below, stone doors remain closed, not cursed, not forgotten, just sleeping, in the cradle of the deep. Now let's walk through a desert canyon. Its walls rising high around you, glowing pink in the fading sun. You've arrived at Petra, the ancient city carved into sandstone by the Nabateans over 2,000 years ago. They built palaces, temples, and tombs. Not with bricks, but with the cliffside itself. Each facade is sculpted from the living rock. Ornate columns, eagles and urns, triangular pediments that glow coral in the light. One of the most famous tombs is the Al-Khazna, or the treasury, though it was never a treasury at all. It was likely the tomb of a king. Step closer. Run your fingers along the carved details. Feel the grain of time in the stone. No two tombs are alike. Each one reflects the person it held. Some are grand, others modest, but all face the same eternal truth, that life and death are carved from the same rock. There are no written curses here, no traps, only silence, and the faint echo of camel bells in the distance. At night, Petra glows with thousands of candles. The air is cool, the walls are warm to the touch, and the stars peek down between canyon walls. You sit on a smooth stone. The sand is soft beneath your feet. You sip spiced tea, and you feel stillness. The tombs do not frighten, they welcome. Because in Petra, the dead are not lost, they are part of the mountain now. And the mountain sleeps forever. Now the air thickens with ancient incense. The ground beneath you is rich and dark. You're standing in China, where emperors once ruled for lifetimes, and prepared for the next one with equal care. Beneath your feet lies one of the greatest mysteries of all, the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor. He united the warring states, built roads, canals, and began the Great Wall. But it's what he built for his death that astonishes even now. Buried deep beneath a mound of earth, he constructed a vast underground kingdom, a palace for eternity. Guarding it, over 8,000 life-sized soldiers, the terracotta army, each one carved by hand, each one different, faces full of quiet focus. They stand in ranks, chariots behind them, as if waiting for the emperor to wake. But the tomb itself, his chamber, remains sealed. Legends say it contains rivers of mercury, flowing like silver threads around miniature cities. Jewels embedded in the ceiling to mimic the stars. A sun and moon made of pearl. No one has dared to open it, not out of fear, but out of respect. To disturb such stillness feels wrong. Like shouting in a temple. The ancient Chinese believed in balance, in yin and yang, the dance between light and dark, life and death. So the emperor rests undisturbed, a sovereign in slumber, his soldiers still vigilant. And above, you sit quietly, letting the wind move through the reeds, hearing the hush of history all around. The ground beneath you holds stories, and yet, it keeps its peace. As should you. Now the air grows thick with humidity. Birdsong echoes through the trees, leaves shimmer with droplets of rain. We've entered the jungles of Central and South America, where ancient civilizations built cities of stone, then let the jungle take them back. We walk among the ruins of the Maya, the Aztecs and the Inca. Here tombs are hidden beneath temples, within pyramids and under layers of vine and thyme. In Palenque, a Maya city in modern-day Mexico, lies the Temple of the Inscriptions. Deep inside it, archaeologists uncovered the tomb of King Pakal, one of the most powerful rulers of the classic Maya period. He was buried in a sarcophagus of jade and limestone, his face covered by a mask, his body placed as though in flight, as if rising into the stars. The Maya believed in the Chiba tree, a sacred connection between the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Their tombs reflected this journey, a movement through worlds, through transformation, through time. In Peru, the Inca buried their rulers with gold and textiles, deep within the mountains. The royal tombs of Sipan held lords in full regalia, buried with servants, animals and treasures. Not as sacrifice, but as company for the voyage. Even the Nazca, known for their desert-line drawings, built underground tombs sealed with spiral staircases. They were meant to descend, to go inward, into memory, into sleep. And yet, none of these tombs curse. They don't warn. Instead, the jungle does the guarding. The trees whisper, the vines protect, and the earth simply reclaims what it lent. So now picture yourself here, lying beneath a canopy of stars and branches, the sounds of frogs and insects like a lullaby, your body sinking gently into warm earth. The tombs below, the leaves above, and you, at the still center of it all. And now you've wandered far. Through sands and storms, through stone and silence, you've walked among emperors and commoners, warriors and weavers, kings and scribes, each with their own resting place, each with their own story. From the sands of Egypt to the caves of Persia, from the Viking longships to the jungle tombs of the Maya. Not one cursed you, not one warned you away. They simply waited. They waited for someone to listen, to visit in peace, to remember that beneath all the gold, all the carvings, all the myths, they were people. Just like you. They laughed, they wept, they feared death, and they dreamed of what might come after. Their tombs weren't traps, they were love letters, letters to time, letters to the gods, letters to us. And now, you've read them, softly, quietly, with care. You feel your eyes grow heavier, the stone grows warmer beneath your cheek, the wind gentler in your hair. There is no need to rush back. History will wait for you. It always has. So close your eyes now. Let the tombs sleep. Let the past settle. Let your thoughts drift down like dust on old stone. You are safe. You are still. You are held. This was boring history for sleep, and you have earned your rest. Good night.